In 1768, Spanish soldiers marched inland in the Philippines to investigate a village that had gone silent. The journey seemed routine, but the people they passed refused to speak, sealed their homes before nightfall, and avoided the jungle after dark. When voices began calling from the shadows in familiar tones, the soldiers realized too late that something was already moving among them, waiting for night to claim its due. So before we continue, please make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. The orders came to our barracks in Intramuros at the end of the wet season, when the walls steamed after every afternoon rain and the river smelled of rot. A courier read the letter aloud while we stood in a line with sweat on our backs. A village inland from the coast of Panay had stopped sending tribute. 2 men from the coastal post had gone to ask why and did not return. A friar from the district wrote that the people were hiding in their homes after dark and refusing confession. The alcalde wanted soldiers, not more questions. Lieutenant Ortega chose 8 of us. He wanted men who could march in mud without complaining and who would not freeze when the jungle pressed in. I was Corporal Miguel de Rojas, born in Cadiz, in the islands for 6 years. I spoke enough Tagalog to get by and enough Visayan words to understand when someone was insulting us in their own tongue. Sergeant Ruiz came with us, older than the rest, with a scar under his jaw and eyes that stayed busy. Private Mateo Llorente was new, barely able to grow hair on his face, eager to prove he belonged. 2 others, Castaño and Figueroa, were good shots with muskets but talked too much. We also had a friar, Fray Esteban, sent by his order because he knew the countryside and was not afraid to walk into a hut where someone was dying. We left at dawn on a small coastal sloop that carried sacks of rice and a box of powder. The sea was calm and gray. Ortega leaned on the rail and spoke as if he was already writing his report. He said the village was rebellious or lazy, and the missing men were probably drunk in a hut with local women. Ruiz did not argue. He only checked the flints on the muskets and kept the powder box under a tarp. We reached the coastal post near the mouth of a river after 2 days. The post was a low fort of wood and earth with a few cannon that had not been fired in years. The comandante there was a thin man with fever eyes. He greeted Ortega with relief that he tried to hide. He said the 2 missing men were Corporal Salinas and Private Yara. They had taken an interpreter and 3 porters and none had returned. The villagers from the river mouth refused to go inland. They would not even give straight answers. They only pointed upriver and made signs with their hands that I did not like. That night I sat with the interpreter from the post, a man named Tomas who spoke Spanish well. He was Ilongo, baptized, with a cross hanging from his neck that he touched often. I asked him what the signs meant. He looked past me toward the dark trees. "They say there is an Aswang," he said. I had heard the word before, spoken in low voices by servants in Manila when a child died suddenly. I had also heard soldiers laugh at it. I did not laugh. Tomas watched my face and kept going. "They say it looks like a person in the day," he said. "At night it changes. It takes animals. It takes people. It leaves little blood." I told him men disappear for many reasons. Bandits, sickness, running away. He nodded as if he agreed, but his fingers stayed on the cross. Fray Esteban joined us. He asked Tomas what the people had confessed. Tomas hesitated. The friar waited without moving. "They do not confess," Tomas said. "They do not come out." The friar said fear makes people do foolish things. He said if there was a creature, it was a demon or an animal, and either way, it would not be stopped by hiding under mats. He looked at me as he spoke, as if he wanted me to hear his certainty. Before we left the fort, Ruiz insisted on buying extra salt and vinegar from the coastal market. Ortega mocked him for it, asking if he planned to pickle the rebels. Ruiz did not answer. He also asked for a length of stingray tail from a fisherman. The man refused at first, then traded it for a coin and a promise of protection. Ruiz wrapped it in cloth and put it in his pack. Mateo watched with wide eyes. We took Bancas upriver, narrow boats with outriggers. The river ran brown and fast, carrying branches and dead leaves. The banks were tight with palms and thick vines. Insects moved in clouds above the water. The porters paddled without speaking. Tomas sat near the front, eyes scanning the trees as if he expected something to step out in daylight. After a few hours, the river narrowed and the current grew too strong. We went ashore and began walking on a path that was more mud than ground. Leeches stuck to our ankles. Mateo cursed and tried to slap them off, then gagged when he saw the blood. Ruiz showed him how to pinch them near the head and pull slowly. Mateo looked at me after, ashamed, then forced himself to keep moving. We passed small clearings with rice stalks and banana plants. In one clearing we found a pen where a goat should have been. The fence was broken outward, not inward. Bits of hair clung to a splinter. The ground was trampled. There were no tracks I could trust in the mud, only deep impressions and long smears. Castaño said a tiger might have done it. Ortega told him there were no tigers here and to stop talking. Tomas did not look at the pen for long. He stared at the tree line. We reached a cluster of huts on stilts before evening, a hamlet that fed the larger village farther inland. Smoke rose from cook fires, but the people did not come out to greet us. Children peeked from behind posts and vanished. Dogs did not bark. They stayed under huts with their tails tucked. Ortega ordered Tomas to call out. Tomas spoke in the local tongue. After a while, an old man came forward with hands held out, palms open, showing he had no weapon. He bowed low, eyes never lifting to Ortega's face. Ortega demanded food and a place to sleep. The old man nodded too fast and spoke to Tomas. Tomas translated with a tight voice. The old man said they would give us rice and dried fish. He asked us to leave before dark. Ortega laughed and said we were not afraid of night. The old man's mouth tightened. He spoke again. Tomas hesitated before translating. He says you cannot fight it, Tomas said. He says you will bring it here. Ortega stepped close to the old man and grabbed his shirt front, lifting him onto his toes. I saw the old man's eyes fill with tears, not from pain but from dread. Fray Esteban told Ortega to release him. Ortega did, but his face stayed hard. Ruiz pulled me aside and told me to look at the huts. I did. Many had woven screens hung over the windows. Some had bundles of garlic tied to the posts. Others had bowls of salt near the ladders. A few had thorns scattered on the ground beneath. I had seen superstition in Spain too, but this was organized, repeated, and recent. We ate in the open, under a roof of palm leaves. The rice was bland and the fish tasted old. Ortega spoke loudly, telling stories of Spain and mocking the locals. No one joined him. Even Castaño and Figueroa kept quiet, watching the hamlet. After sunset, the jungle became a wall. The air cooled only a little, but the sounds changed. Crickets and frogs filled the dark. A thin tapping noise began somewhere beyond the huts. It was steady, spaced out, then closer, then farther. Mateo asked what it was. Tomas did not answer. Ruiz took the stingray tail from his pack and laid it beside him. Fray Esteban moved among the huts, speaking to those who would open their doors. Some refused. Some cracked a screen and spoke in whispers. When he returned, his face had lost some of its confidence. He asked Ortega to let us post watches and keep the men close. Ortega agreed, but only because he liked the idea of showing discipline. Ruiz put Mateo with me on the first watch. Mateo tried to act calm. His hands shook when he loaded his musket. I told him to breathe through his nose and keep his eyes on the edge of the firelight. He nodded too many times. The tapping sound returned. It came from above at first, then from the trees, then from behind one hut. I heard a soft drag on bamboo, slow and careful. I turned my head and saw a shadow shift under a hut on stilts. I raised my musket, but I could not aim into the dark without seeing a target. Mateo whispered, "Corporal, is that a man?" I told him I did not know. The shadow moved again, then stopped. A dog under the same hut let out a short yelp that cut off fast. No barking followed, no struggle, only silence. Then the tapping noise again, now farther away, as if it had moved without stepping on anything. I felt sweat on my palms and forced my grip tighter. I did not want Mateo to see fear in my face, but I could not deny what my senses told me. Something had taken that dog in less time than it takes to draw a breath, and the people in the huts did not scream. They stayed quiet, as if they had learned that noise brings worse things. Ruiz came up behind us without announcing himself. He had been supposed to rest. He looked at the dark under the huts and then at me. "Do not fire unless you see it," he said. "Do not chase." Mateo swallowed hard. "What is it, Sergeant?" Ruiz did not answer the way Ortega would have. He watched the trees and spoke in a flat voice. "It is hunting," he said, "and it knows we arrived." Ortega took over the watch after midnight. Ruiz made the change himself, waking Ortega with a hand on his shoulder. Ortega rose angry, then saw Ruiz's face and shut his mouth. I lay under the roof with my musket across my chest and tried to sleep. I could not. The tapping stopped, then started again, farther out, like a signal moving around the hamlet. Once I heard a low sound that might have been a bird, but it came from too close to the ground. The next sound was a soft clack, like teeth touching. Near dawn, a woman screamed from inside a hut. It was one sharp sound, then muffled. Ortega shouted for us to form up. We rushed to the hut. The ladder shook as people inside moved. Fray Esteban called out for them to open. The door stayed shut. Ruiz pushed past us and climbed first. Ortega followed, then me. Inside, the hut smelled of smoke and sweat and fear. A family huddled in a corner. A woman held her mouth with both hands. A boy lay on the floor, eyes open, chest rising too fast. Another child cried without sound, face wet. Ruiz lifted the woven mat that covered the window. The mat had been pulled aside from the outside. The bamboo slats below it were cracked. A thin smear ran down one post, dark and sticky. Ortega demanded to know what happened. Tomas translated. The father spoke quickly, glancing at the window. Tomas answered in Spanish, voice rough. He says something climbed up, Tomas said. It did not break the ladder. It came from the side. It reached through the window and took the baby. The mother made a broken sound and shook her head hard. Her hands opened, showing scratches on her palms where she had gripped something. Ruiz looked at the scratches and then at the cracked bamboo. He knelt and touched the smear. He brought his fingers to his nose. His expression did not change, but his eyes narrowed. Fray Esteban whispered a prayer. Ortega swore and ordered the father to show where the creature went. The father stared as if Ortega had asked him to walk into fire. He shook his head and spoke again. Tomas translated. He says it went into the trees, Tomas said. He says if you follow, it will take more. Ortega slapped the father once, not hard enough to knock him down, but hard enough to make the children flinch. I felt heat rise in my throat. Ruiz caught my eye and gave a small shake of his head. Ortega ordered us to march at first light. He said we would reach the main village by midday and take control. He spoke as if a village could be held like a fort. The hamlet tried to feed us again, but the pots were empty. People had stopped cooking. They packed what they could and began moving toward the river, hoping to reach the coast before night. Ortega called them cowards. Fray Esteban watched them leave with a tight jaw and did not argue. We started inland on a narrower path that climbed in places and cut through thick growth. The air smelled of damp earth. Mosquitoes found every exposed patch of skin. Mateo walked behind me, silent now, his earlier eagerness gone. He kept glancing over his shoulder. Castaño tried to tell a joke about spirits and garlic. No one laughed. After 2 hours, we found something that made us stop. A water buffalo lay on its side beside the path, legs stiff, flies already gathering. Its belly had been opened with a clean cut. The meat inside was missing in strips, as if something had taken time to eat without being disturbed. The head was turned toward the path. One eye was gone. The other stared blankly. Figueroa covered his nose. Ortega stepped close and kicked the carcass once, then looked around. There were tracks this time, or something like them. The mud held long marks that curved, as if a heavy body had dragged itself and then lifted. Between the marks were prints that looked like hands, but too long, with deep points where nails had sunk in. Tomas refused to step closer. He stood at the edge of the clearing, breathing hard. Ruiz crouched and studied the marks. He pulled a small knife and measured the distance between the handprints with the blade. He looked up at the trees, then at Ortega. "It is not a man," Ruiz said. Ortega's face tightened. "Everything is a man," he said. "Bandits can crawl. Bandits can use claws. They want to scare the villagers." Ruiz did not argue. He stood and wiped his hands on his trousers. He told us to keep moving and not spread out. Ortega ordered us to move faster. By late morning, we reached the main village. It was larger than the hamlet, with a small chapel and a few sturdier houses of wood. The fields around it were half-tended. Smoke did not rise from most hearths. The village should have been full of noise. It felt held down. A few men came out to meet us, thin and tired, holding spears and bolos. Their leader was a man named Datu Alim, according to Tomas. He wore a worn shirt and had a scar across his forearm. He did not bow to Ortega. He stood upright, eyes steady, and spoke in a slow voice. Tomas translated as Ortega demanded tribute and answers. Datu Alim said the tribute was ready, but the porters were dead or gone. He said the 2 Spanish soldiers had come, argued, and then left with a guide. They had not been seen again. He said the village had tried to guard the paths, but the guards vanished. He said the creature came when it wanted and took who it wanted. Ortega asked where the bodies were. Datu Alim said there were none. Ortega asked what the creature was. Datu Alim said it was an Aswang, and that it had lived in the hills longer than any of them. He said some people thought it was a person cursed. Others thought it was not human at all. He said it walked among them in the day. That last sentence made the air change. I saw Castaño glance at Figueroa. Mateo's mouth opened and closed without words. Fray Esteban stepped forward, asking if anyone had been accused. Datu Alim's eyes flicked to the chapel, then away. He said a woman had been killed 2 nights ago because some men claimed they saw her eyes shine in the dark. He said they were wrong, and now her family had fled. Ortega took that as proof of madness. He told Datu Alim the village would obey the crown and the church, and we would remain until we found the missing soldiers. He ordered a house cleared for us and demanded that villagers bring food. Datu Alim agreed with the face of a man who has no better choice. We settled in a long house near the chapel. The floor was bamboo slats. The walls were thin. Ruiz immediately chose positions for sentries. He told us to keep the fire low after dark and to hang a lantern inside the doorway rather than outside. Ortega argued, saying light shows strength. Ruiz said light also shows targets. Ortega gave in, but I saw the insult on his face. Fray Esteban went to the chapel. He found the local priest gone, fled days before. The altar had been stripped of anything valuable. The benches were overturned. He stood at the doorway for a long time, then returned and told Ortega we could not rely on the chapel for shelter. Ortega ignored him. In the afternoon, I walked the edge of the village with Tomas and Ruiz. We looked for signs of struggle, tracks, anything that pointed to where the missing men had gone. We found a broken sandal near the riverbank. We found a Spanish button in the mud, tarnished but recognizable. Tomas picked it up with shaking fingers and handed it to me as if it burned. Ruiz asked Datu Alim for the guide who had gone with Salinas and Jara. Datu Alim said the guide was named Nilo. He had not returned. His wife claimed she heard him outside their hut at night calling softly. She had not answered. In the morning, she found his bolo leaning against the ladder. The blade was clean. The handle was wet. When the sun began to lower, the villagers started closing their doors. Smoke stopped rising. Children vanished inside. The path through the village emptied fast. Even the dogs disappeared. It felt like a place preparing for a storm that no one could see. Mateo approached me while I checked my musket. His face was pale. "Corporal," he said, "if it can look like a person in the day, how do we know it is not here now?" I looked at the villagers' closed doors, then at the few who still moved, carrying water or tying bundles of garlic. I thought of the words Datu Alim had used. It walked among them. "We do not know," I said. "We watch what people do. We do not trust smiles." He nodded, then swallowed. "What if it looks like one of us?" That question landed hard. I thought of the missing men, their uniforms, their faces. I thought of the clean cut on the buffalo and the handprints in the mud. Ruiz called us together. He told us the plan for the night. 2 men on watch at a time, one at the doorway, one at the rear wall where a window opened onto the fields. No one left the house after dark. If someone heard a voice outside, they did not answer. If someone felt something on the roof, they did not climb up. We stayed together. We fired only if we saw a target. Ortega listened, jaw tight, then said he would add his own order. If the creature was a man using fear, we would take a villager hostage and force the others to speak. Fray Esteban snapped at him, saying fear had already broken them and cruelty would only make it worse. Ortega told the friar to mind his prayers. The argument ended when Ruiz stepped between them and said, "We will survive the night first." Night fell fast. The jungle dark was complete. The village seemed to hold its breath. The first hour passed with only insect noise and the low crackle of our small fire. I sat with my back against the wall and listened. My mind ran through every sound and tried to label it. I did not want to imagine anything, but my thoughts went there anyway. Then a sound came from outside, close to the house. It was not the tapping from the hamlet. It was softer, like fingernails on wood. It moved along the wall, slow, testing. Mateo stiffened beside me. Ruiz lifted his hand, palm down, telling us to stay still. A whisper came next, low and careful, in Spanish. "Open," it said. "Help me." The voice was familiar. It was Sergeant Ruiz's voice. My throat tightened. Ruiz's eyes widened just a fraction. He did not move. The whisper came again, closer to the doorway. "Miguel," it said. "Corporal, open. I am hurt." It was my name, said with Ruiz's tone. Mateo turned his head toward Ruiz, confused, then toward the doorway. Ortega's hand went to his sword. Fray Esteban made the sign of the cross without speaking. Ruiz leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Do not answer. Do not look away." The voice outside changed. It became higher, younger. "Fray Esteban," it said. "Father, please, they took my leg." It sounded like Mateo. Mateo made a small choking sound. I grabbed his sleeve hard. keeping him in place, his eyes filled with tears. He stared at the doorway as if he could see through it. The whisper moved to the rear window. "Lieutenant," it said, "I have found them. Open. I will show you." Now it sounded like Corporal Salinas, a man we had known at the fort. Ortega took a step, then stopped. His face had lost color. He knew that voice. The whisper stopped. For a moment, there was only the insects again. Then the scratching started on the roof, not heavy, not careless, but precise, as if something with weight was placing itself carefully to avoid noise. The bamboo above us creaked once, then held. Ruiz raised his musket slowly, aiming upward, but he did not fire. He waited for a shape, a shadow, any proof. A thin piece of bamboo above the doorway shifted. A narrow gap opened as something pressed down from above. The lantern light caught a glimpse of skin, pale and stretched, and then a hand appeared, fingers too long, nails dark and thick. It reached down toward the latch from the outside, moving with patience, not haste. Ortega shouted and swung his sword upward. The blade struck the hand. There was a wet sound. The hand jerked back, but it did not fall. It slid away as if it had no bones to break. A low sound came from above, not a scream, more like a breath drawn in through teeth. Then the roof creaked again as the weight shifted away and the scratching moved toward the rear of the house. Ruiz hissed, "Stay." But Figueroa, in panic, ran to the rear window and shoved the screen aside to shoot into the dark. The moment he opened it, something struck from outside. It was so fast I saw only a blur. Figueroa's musket flew from his hands. His body hit the floor, dragged backward toward the window with force that did not match a man's arms. He grabbed the bamboo slats, fingers white, and screamed once before his head slammed against the frame. Blood spattered the wall. Castaño lunged to grab him. Ruiz caught Castaño's belt and pulled him back hard, saving him from being taken too. Figueroa's legs kicked twice, then vanished out the window. The screen snapped back into place as if pushed by a hand from outside. We stared at the window. The whole thing had taken 2 breaths. Ortega stood frozen, sword raised, mouth open. Mateo sobbed without sound. Fray Esteban whispered a prayer that I could not follow. Ruiz moved first. He pressed the screen tight and tied it with rope. He shoved a bench against the wall below it. His face was calm in a way that scared me more than panic. "He is gone," Ruiz said, voice low. "We do not follow." Ortega finally found his voice. He shouted orders, telling us to go out, to form up, to hunt it. Ruiz stepped into his path and said, "If you open that door, it will take another." Ortega's eyes burned. He raised his hand as if to strike Ruiz, then stopped when he saw the look in Ruiz's eyes. Ortega lowered his hand slowly, as if he could not believe himself. Outside, the village stayed silent. No one came to help. No one lit a torch. They had heard the scream, and they had chosen to live. We spent the rest of the night in a tight knot, muskets aimed at every opening, listening to scratches move along the roof and walls. The creature did not try the latch again. It did not speak again. It only circled, patient, letting us sit with what we had seen. When dawn came, the light did not bring relief. It only showed the blood on the bamboo floor, the broken frame, and the empty space where Figueroa had been. At first light, Ortega ordered the door opened. Ruiz argued for waiting until the sun was higher. Ortega ignored him. When the door swung wide, the village looked unchanged. Smoke rose from a few hearths now. People moved again, slow and careful, eyes lowered. No one asked about the scream. We stepped outside. The ground beneath the rear window was torn. Bamboo slats lay snapped. The earth held deep impressions pressed into the mud, longer than a man's stride, angled as if something had launched itself backward with weight and control. There was blood on the leaves, bright and fresh, smeared in a line that led toward the fields and then vanished where the ground hardened. Mateo stared at the marks and whispered Figueroa's name once, then bit his lip hard enough to bleed. Castaño stood with his arms wrapped around himself, staring at nothing. Fray Esteban knelt by the blood and made the sign of the cross again, slower this time. Datu Alim approached without being called. He looked at the window and then at the ground. He did not ask questions. He spoke quietly to Tomas. Tomas translated. "He says it took another," Tomas said. "He says it will come again tonight." Ortega rounded on Datu Alim and demanded help. He demanded men, weapons, guides. Datu Alim said the men would not go into the hills. He said they would die and leave their families without fathers. Ortega threatened punishment. Datu Alim did not move. He said punishment would not stop the creature. Ruiz asked a different question. He asked if anyone had seen a person acting strangely in the day. Datu Alim hesitated. He said there were rumors. A man who walked alone at dusk, a woman who never ate with others, a healer who traveled between villages and returned without scratches while others were hurt. None of the rumors were solid. Each accusation ended in fear and silence. Fray Esteban said we should gather everyone and speak openly, bring things into the light. Datu Alim said that had already been tried. It ended with a woman dead and the creature unharmed. He said fear had taught them to endure, not to fight. Ortega decided we would do what soldiers do. He ordered a search of the fields and nearby forest while it was day. He said we would find a lair, bones, something that proved it was an animal or a bandit. Ruiz said the tracks would be gone by now. Ortega said we would try anyway. We moved out in a loose line, muskets loaded, eyes scanning the ground and the trees. The jungle pressed close. Sunlight filtered down in broken patches. Sweat ran into my eyes. I forced myself to keep my breathing steady. An hour in, we found what was left of Figueroa. Not all of him. His uniform jacket lay torn in a clearing, soaked and stiff. One sleeve was empty, the buttons were gone, ripped off. His musket lay nearby, bent at the barrel, as if something had crushed it in a grip and then thrown it aside. Mateo gagged and turned away. Castaño sank to his knees and made a sound I had never heard from him before, raw and uncontrolled. Ortega stood stiff, jaw clenched. Ruiz walked the edge of the clearing, eyes on the trees. There were bones deeper in, small ones, old and clean. A child's arm bone lay wedged between roots. Nearby, scraps of cloth hung from thorns. None were Spanish. This place had been used before. Ruiz said we would mark the spot and leave. Ortega wanted to burn it. Fray Esteban said burning bones would not cleanse anything. Ortega kicked the dirt and turned away. On the way back, Castaño lagged. I stayed near him, saying little. His eyes were red and fixed ahead. He muttered once that Figueroa had owed him money, then fell silent again. Mateo walked close to Ruiz, watching his hands, as if Ruiz's calm might transfer by touch. Back in the village, tension had shifted. People watched us openly now, not with fear but with a kind of tired judgment. We were proof that the creature did not care about uniforms or prayers. We ate what little food was brought, mostly rice and boiled roots. No one stayed near us longer than necessary. In the afternoon, a girl went missing. She had been sent to fetch water from the river. Her basket was found on the bank, untouched. The water surface was calm. No tracks led away. Her mother did not scream. She sat on the ground and stared at the basket until Datu Alim led her away. That broke something in Ortega. He ordered a curfew, as if one did not already exist. He ordered villagers to stay inside under threat of punishment. He posted us at the edges of the village. He said we would draw the creature out by showing strength. Ruiz told me quietly that strength was not what it tested. He said patience was. As dusk came, Fray Esteban gathered those who would come and spoke to them. He did not preach. He listened. People told him what they had seen over the months. Livestock taken without sound. Footsteps on roofs, voices calling from the dark that matched loved ones. A shape seen once in torchlight, tall and thin, joints bent wrong, skin pulled tight over bone. Each story added weight without repeating the last. One man said he had followed a voice that sounded like his brother. He had seen the brother standing in a clearing, back turned. When the man spoke, the figure's head turned too far, too smooth, and the face was not right. He ran and did not look back. His brother was later found dead in his hut, untouched. When night fell, we took positions again. This time, Ortega insisted on standing watch himself. Ruiz did not argue. He placed us carefully. I was at the doorway with Mateo. Ruiz took the rear. Castaño sat against the wall, staring at his musket. The first sound came from the fields, a soft rustle that moved against the wind. Then a cough, dry and weak, close to the chapel. Ortega stiffened. "Help!" a voice said in Spanish. "Please!" It was Figueroa's voice. Mateo shook violently. I put my hand over his mouth before he could answer. His eyes rolled toward me, pleading. I shook my head once. The voice moved, circling, testing. It called Ortega by name. It spoke of orders, of duty, of men lost because we had hesitated. Ortega's breathing grew loud. His grip on his sword tightened. Then the voice changed again. "Father," it said. "It hurts." It was the girl's voice. Fray Esteban stepped forward without thinking. Ruiz shouted for him to stop. Too late. The chapel door creaked as Fray Esteban reached it. The door did not open outward. Something struck it from the side, bursting through the thin wood. Fray Esteban went down under the blow. I saw a shape in the lantern light. tall, folded in on itself, limbs bent tight, skin pale and stretched. Its face was wrong, features pulled long, mouth too wide. Its eyes caught the light and reflected it flat and empty. Ruiz fired. The shot took the creature in the chest. The sound was deafening in the tight space. The creature did not fall. It recoiled, then moved with speed that made my eyes lose it. It grabbed Fray Esteban and dragged him toward the gap in the chapel wall. I ran forward without thinking. Ortega shouted. Mateo fired wildly. Castaño screamed and charged. The creature turned its head toward us. Its mouth opened and closed once. Then it leapt backward, carrying Fray Esteban with it, clearing the wall in a single motion and vanishing into the dark beyond. We stood there, stunned, the smell of powder thick in the air. The chapel wall lay broken. Blood marked the ground where Fray Esteban had been. Castaño ran after them into the dark, screaming the friar's name. Ruiz shouted for him to stop. Castaño did not listen. His voice cut off fast, replaced by a wet sound that ended just as quickly. No one moved after that. We stayed where we were until dawn, listening to nothing but our own breathing. When morning came, there was no sign of Fray Esteban or Castaño. The villagers began packing what little they had. Datu Alim told Ortega they would abandon the village. Ortega did not argue. He looked older than he had days before. We left that place before night could fall again. We did not find the missing men. We did not bring order or answers. We brought proof. I carried that proof with me long after, in the memory of voices that should not have spoken, and a shape that did not care about our reasons. The islands have many things that walk in daylight and hunt at night. Some places are not meant to be held.